Come with me." The words cut through the cold, fluorescent air of the pharmacy, spoken with the quiet authority of someone used to being obeyed, but not without gentleness. Maya Williams, standing at the counter with trembling hands and a burning child in her arms, stiffened. Elijah whimpered softly against her shoulder. His 3-year-old body, fever-flushed and fragile, twitched for the second time that hour, tiny spasms of a body too hot, too weak. Maya gripped him tighter, her heart pounding, panic swelling behind her ribcage. The pharmacist behind the counter had already moved on. The receipt printer whirred. The register clicked. But none of that mattered. Maya's hand clutched the last $5 she had. It wasn't enough. Not for the antibiotics. Not even close. She turned slowly toward the voice, and when she saw him, the breath left her lungs. Daniel Harris. Gray wool coat. Neatly cut salt and pepper hair. Those same pale green eyes that once made her heart race. Eyes that now stared at her with a stillness that was no longer unfamiliar, but unbearably intimate. He didn't look away. He hadn't flinched when he saw her name years ago, on the letter that said, "I'm sorry. We're done." No explanation. No closure. And now here he was, standing a few feet away, watching her hold a sick child, watching her shake with cold and pride and helplessness. "I don't need your help," she said, her voice firm despite the trembling in her legs. A woman nearby snorted. "Pride and poverty, some combo. Girl, just take the man's offer," another woman muttered, loud enough to hear. "That baby look half dead." An older man chuckled cruelly. "All that attitude, no pocket change." Maya heard them all, but she didn't flinch. She had heard worse, grown up with worse, and now, the man she once loved, the man she had walked away from to protect, was standing in front of her, seeing her like this. Daniel didn't move. He looked at Elijah, whose head lolled. Lips parted as a raspy breath left his throat. Another twitch worse this time. His fingers jerked. His little arm kicked out. Maya's stomach dropped. The man's voice returned, quieter now, but firmer. "You're not doing this for yourself. You're doing it for him." Maya's lips trembled. "You shouldn't be here." But Daniel didn't press her. He didn't ask about the past. Didn't demand explanations. He simply turned to the stunned cashier and said, "Full prescription. Amoxicillin. Liquid form. Now." The cashier obeyed. Outside, snow had begun to fall again, soft, slow flakes drifting through the bitter Detroit air. Maya stood silently as Daniel opened the SUV door for her. "Let me take you to my clinic," he said. "It's nearby. We'll get him looked at properly." She hesitated. "You own a clinic now?" "A few," he replied. "This one's quiet. Private." In the car, Elijah whimpered but didn't stir much. The warmth from the heater surrounded him, and Maya gently stroked his cheek, biting the inside of her cheek. Her pride still screamed. No, but her son was all that mattered now. 15 minutes later, they arrived at a small, modern brick building tucked behind a row of trees. The sign read Harris Family Medical Center. It was after hours, but Daniel had keys. The lights inside flickered on, and the sterile scent of disinfectant and eucalyptus greeted them. He led her to a small exam room. Within minutes, a pediatric nurse appeared, no questions asked. Daniel stood back, watching, calm and efficient, as Elijah was checked, cooled, and treated. When it was over and the nurse stepped out, Maya stood awkwardly in the corner, holding her coat to her chest. "I'll pay you back," she mumbled, "for the prescription and this, every cent. I just need time, then I'll disappear again. You won't even know I was here. If you feel connected to the character, give this video a like and comment. The location where you are watching from you may be surprised that someone nearby is watching along with you." Daniel turned to her, arms crossed. "Is that how you've been living? Debt and disappearance?" She flinched. "It's none of your business." "The hell it's not." His voice wasn't angry, but it cracked at the edge. He stepped closer, lowering it. "You left me, Maya. No warning, no explanation. One day we were planning the rest of our lives, and the next, gone. You didn't even let me fight for you." She looked down, shame blooming hot in her throat. I had to leave, she whispered. Your mother made sure of that. Daniel's face darkened. My mother? She came to my apartment. Said I'd ruin you. That the world wasn't ready for a Harris to marry a black girl from the East Side. And deep down, I believed her. I didn't want to be the weight that dragged you down. Daniel turned away for a long moment, jaw clenched. Then he faced her again. You think I care about legacy? About their name more than I cared about you? I didn't want you to have to choose. I would have chosen you, every time. She shook her head. It doesn't matter now. I'm not that girl anymore. I'm a single mom scraping by. I can't be in your world. I won't be your charity. I'll pay you back. And then, I'll be gone. Daniel looked at her long and hard, then stepped forward, gently reaching for her hand. Don't go, he said softly. We lost each other once. Let's not do it again. Maya, forget the past. Come back. Start over, with me. Maya's breath caught. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came. You can't mean that, she said finally. Look at me. I am looking at you, he said. And I see the same woman I fell in love with, strong, proud, unstoppable. And I see someone I never stopped loving. No. Her eyes welled up. Daniel. Just then, Elijah stirred on the exam bed. His tiny fingers reached up blindly. His lips parted, dry, but audible. Bah, he croaked, voice weak. Maya gasped softly. Daniel's eyes widened. Elijah turned toward the sound of Daniel's voice and reached again. Bah. Maya covered her mouth with her hand. Her knees nearly gave out. She knelt beside her son, stroking his forehead, heart breaking open. He's never said that before, she whispered. Daniel crouched beside her, gently placing a hand on Elijah's back. Maybe, he said, voice cracking. Maybe it's time someone earned it. Suddenly, the sound of heels clicking sharply down the hallway shattered the quiet. A nurse peeked in, eyes wide with panic. Dr. Harris, your mother is here. Before Daniel could respond, the door slammed open. Vivian Harris stood tall, elegant, fur coat draped over her shoulders. Her eyes locked on Maya and blazed. You filthy little manipulator, she spat. I warned you once. You come back here with a sickly child like you're owed something? What are you trying to pull, you? Mama, stop. Vivian's hand flew before he could finish. A sharp slap landed on Maya's cheek. You think because my son has a clinic, you can crawl back, still playing victim, still using your color like a shield. Daniel stepped between them, voice low but furious. Don't touch her again. Vivian's eyes narrowed. You defend her over your own blood? I'm defending what's right. She leaned close, hissing, if you don't step away from this garbage, I'll see you stripped of every board seat, every foundation, every cent your father left you. I'll ruin you. Daniel said nothing for a moment. Maya, still stunned, cheeks flushed, slowly stood, gathered Elijah in her arms. Her pride, though bruised, was intact. I won't be your scandal, she said quietly. You don't owe me anything. I'm sorry for bringing this to your door. Maya, but she was already gone, stepping past Vivian and out into the cold. The door of the clinic shut behind Maya with a quiet finality, the winter wind rushing to meet her like a slap in the face. She gripped Elijah tighter against her chest, her cheek still stinging from Vivian's slap, though the burn inside her chest, the humiliation, was far worse. Snow was falling heavier now. The sidewalk glistened with wet ice, and Maya stepped carefully, her shoes thin and worn. She had no idea where she was going. Her car was parked 3 blocks away, if it could even be called a car. And her pride, what was left of it, had shattered somewhere between the exam room and the hallway of judgment. She heard the door open behind her, footsteps rushing. Maya, wait, Daniel's voice. She didn't turn around. Maya, please, he called again. You can't just walk out with him in this weather. She spun around then, her eyes fierce, glittering. What would you have me do, Daniel? Stay? Let your mother slap me again in front of nurses and your staff? He winced. I didn't know she was coming. A staff member must have called her probably when they saw your name. She still controls everything, Maya snapped. She said she'd destroy your career if I stayed, and you didn't deny it. Daniel looked wounded, but not surprised. You think I care about my career more than you and Elijah? I think you live in a world where a woman like your mother can make that choice for you whether you care or not. They stood in silence for a moment, the snow muffling the city sounds around them. Elijah whimpered softly in her arms, nuzzling his face into her shoulder. I'll be fine, Maya said quietly. He's had his medicine. Thank you for that. I'll find a way to repay you. No, I don't want repayment, Daniel said, stepping closer. I want you. I want him safe. I want us back. Maya's shoulders tensed. It's not that simple. It is if you let it be. She shook her head. You don't understand. You can't fix this. You can't swoop in and erase the last 7 years. I'm not trying to erase them, Daniel said, voice low. I'm trying to start from here. From this moment. She looked away. The streetlight above them buzzed, casting a pale glow over her tired face. Her lips were chapped, her eyes rimmed red. She looked like a woman on the edge, held together by will alone. I don't belong in your world, she said. I clean houses for women like your mother. I feed my son from a pantry 2 churches run twice a week. You own hospitals. You belong with me, he said simply. Maya's eyes flicked up to his. She wanted to believe him. God. She wanted to believe him. But the image of Vivian's face, so full of rage and disgust, flashed in her mind again. He called you Ba, she whispered. He's never said that before. Daniel's voice softened. Maybe he knows something we haven't admitted yet. Just then, Elijah stirred again. This time his voice was clearer. Ba. Daniel reached out instinctively, hand brushing Elijah's small back. I want to be there for him, Daniel said. Not just in emergencies. Always. Maya swallowed hard. And when your mother threatens your foundation, when the press finds out, I'll deal with it. I should have dealt with it years ago. Her heart ached at what could have been. I can't let you throw your life away for me, she whispered. You're not a mistake, Maya. You're the only right thing I've ever walked away from. Before she could answer, her phone buzzed in her coat pocket. She shifted Elijah carefully and pulled it out with one hand. A message lit the cracked screen. Notice of final eviction. Unit must be vacated by Monday. Court order attached. Her stomach dropped. She exhaled slowly, the air turning to mist before her. Daniel noticed her face pale. What is it? Nothing, she said automatically. Maya. She turned the screen toward him. He read the notice, and his jaw clenched. Where were you planning to go? She didn't answer. Because the truth was, she had no plan. Stay with me, he said. Number. It's temporary. For Elijah. It won't be temporary, she said bitterly. Because once I stay, I'll get used to it. To warm sheets, to not wondering where our next meal comes from. And then I'll hate myself all over again for needing you. Daniel stepped forward and gently cupped her cheek, the one Vivian had slapped. You're allowed to need people, he said. Tears welled up, but she blinked them away. I have to protect him. From instability. From confusion. From hope that ends in heartbreak. Daniel didn't argue. He simply opened the back door of his SUV again. Let me drive you home. Just home. You don't have to say yes to anything else tonight. She hesitated, then nodded once, wordlessly. He opened the passenger door for her. She slid in, cradling Elijah, who was beginning to doze, the medicine working its slow magic. As Daniel drove in silence, Maya stared out the window, watching the lights blur. She thought of that slap, of Vivian's hissed words, of her promise to disappear, but also of Elijah's soft ba, nigh, and Daniel's unwavering voice. You're the only right thing I've ever walked away from. In that moment, a war broke out inside her, one side aching to protect her son at all costs, the other daring to believe, for the first time in years, that maybe, just maybe, home wasn't a place she had to find alone. Maya stood in front of her apartment door, arms full with a sleeping Elijah and a tattered diaper bag slung over her shoulder. Daniel hovered behind her, holding a small plastic bag with the antibiotics and a bottle of children's Tylenol. The hallway smelled like mildew and overcooked cabbage. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, and somewhere a dog barked non-stop behind a thin door. She fumbled with the keys. I got it, Daniel offered gently, stepping forward. I can do it, Maya replied, sharper than she meant. Then, softer, sorry, I'm just tired. Daniel nodded and stepped back. The lock jammed. She twisted harder, biting her lip. The key finally gave, and the door creaked open into a dark, narrow space that barely qualified as a one-bedroom. The heat hadn't been working right for weeks, so the air inside was as cold as the wind outside. Welcome to paradise, she muttered, flicking on the lone lamp by the peeling wall. Daniel looked around. It was clean, despite the peeling paint, the second-hand furniture, the cracked window taped up with plastic. A small electric heater hummed in the corner. Elijah's coloring books were stacked beside an old milk crate. The couch doubled as her bed. A microwave sat on top of a mini-fridge. Maya laid Elijah gently on the couch and covered him with a faded blanket, brushing a kiss to his forehead. Daniel placed the medicine on the kitchenette counter, scanning the room with quiet eyes. He wasn't judging, at least not her. He was judging what life had made her endure. I'll be out of here by Monday, she said, voice low. Eviction notice came through. They gave me the weekend. Daniel turned toward her. Where will you go? I'll figure something out. Maybe I can find a shelter that takes single mothers. It's not the first time. That hit him like a blow to the chest. You've been homeless before? She nodded. Twice. Once after Elijah was born, when my husband's accident insurance didn't cover a thing, and once last winter, when the heater exploded and the building flooded. We slept in my car for 2 weeks. Daniel stepped closer, slowly, like approaching a wounded bird. Maya, you're not alone anymore. You don't have to live like this. I'm not living like this because I want to, she snapped. Then catching herself, she sighed. Sorry, I know you're trying. I just don't want you to feel responsible for me, or guilty. It's not guilt, he said. It's love. It always was. Law. She closed her eyes. I should have told you, she whispered. Everything. About your mother. About why I disappeared. But I was scared. Daniel's jaw tightened. She had no right to threaten you. Or today. I should have stopped her. She still owns most of your world, doesn't she? Maya asked, watching his face. She's on several boards, but I'm not 18 anymore. I have my own stake now, my own voice. And yet you didn't raise it tonight. Daniel exhaled slowly. You're right, I froze. Not because I agreed with her, but because I've spent years letting her hold power over my life. It ends now. Maya studied him, unsure whether to believe him or brace for another goodbye. I'm not asking you to save me, Daniel. I know, but I'm still asking you to let me try. Just then, Elijah stirred. He let out a soft whimper and sat up slowly, blinking at the room. His eyes landed on Daniel. Bah. Maya froze. Daniel walked over and crouched beside him. Hey, buddy, you're feeling a little better? Elijah nodded, then reached for Daniel's hand. Maya's heart clenched. This child, her whole world, had never known what it meant to feel safe around a man. Until now. She turned away, blinking back tears, pretending to dig in a drawer. I should warm some soup, she mumbled. I can help, Daniel offered. Number, you've done enough. She moved to the microwave and poured a can of chicken noodle into a chipped bowl. The machine buzzed and wheezed as it struggled to rotate. Her hands were shaking. She hated that part of her wanted him there. That part of her longed to hand over the fear, the exhaustion, just for one night. But she also knew the cost. Vivian Harris would not back down. The world Daniel lived in, the country clubs, the corporate dinners, the wealth had no room for the woman who cleaned motel bathrooms and stretched oatmeal for 3 days. I need to get Elijah to bed, she said finally. He sleeps better when I read to him. Daniel nodded and stood. I'll head out. He didn't argue, didn't beg, just looked at her with those steady eyes that still made her ache. If you need anything, he said, anything at all, you call me, day or night. She nodded but didn't promise. He walked to the door, then paused, looking back one last time. You know, sometimes when life closes a door, it opens a window. She gave him a tired smile. Yeah, but sometimes it just leaves you standing in the cold. He didn't push, just nodded and slipped out. As the door clicked shut behind him, Maya turned off the microwave and carried Elijah into the bedroom. She tucked him into the small mattress on the floor and grabbed his favorite picture book. His tiny hand clutched hers. Is he really my ba? He asked sleepily. Maya hesitated. He could be. If we let him. Elijah smiled faintly and drifted off. Maya sat beside him in the dark, her heart full of too many truths. Outside, the snow kept falling. And in the stillness of that broken little apartment, for the first time in years, Maya allowed herself a fragile, dangerous thing. Hope. At dawn, Maya woke to the sound of soft coughing and the steady hum of her old electric heater. Elijah was still asleep, a faint sheen of sweat on his brow. The fever had broken. She reached over and brushed a kiss to his temple, relief washing over her like sunlight after a long storm. She sat back against the wall and rubbed her eyes. Outside, the sky had just begun to lighten a dull gray, casting soft shadows across the room. The eviction notice sat folded on the kitchen counter, mocking her. She had 48 hours to leave. She didn't have a plan. The idea of calling Daniel again, it pressed at the edges of her thoughts like an itch she didn't dare scratch. She couldn't burden him again, not after last night. She remembered how his hand had reached for Elijah's, how her son had called him Ba. She remembered Daniel's eyes, not filled with pity, but something more dangerous, longing. Real, open, relentless longing. Not just for the boy, but for her. And that terrified her. She was rinsing out Elijah's soup bowl when her phone buzzed. A text. "Daniel, you awake? I have something to show you. Pick you up in 20? She stared at the screen. Her first instinct was to say no. But then she looked at Elijah, safe, warm, and breathing easier than he had in days. She typed, "Fine," but only for a few minutes. Exactly 20 minutes later, Daniel's SUV pulled up to the curb outside her apartment building. Maya stepped out, bundled in her worn coat, Elijah clutching a stuffed rabbit to his chest. He was wrapped in a thick blanket Daniel had left the night before, the one that still smelled like leather and cedar. "Good morning," Daniel greeted, stepping out to open the door for them. "This better not be some charity stunt," Maya warned, climbing in. "It's not. You're not going to surprise me with cameras or a job interview or your mother waiting to slap me again?" Daniel chuckled, though there was a trace of tension in his eyes. "Definitely not. Though if my mother ever shows up again, I'm changing the locks on the clinic." They drove in silence for several minutes, until Daniel pulled into an unfamiliar neighborhood. It was quiet, tree-lined, with modest homes. Not the luxury she expected from someone of his status. He turned into a driveway and parked in front of a small, charming blue house with white trim and a covered porch. "What is this?" Maya asked, frowning. Daniel turned off the engine and faced her. "This is one of the houses I bought through my foundation. It was meant to be transitional housing for single mothers, but this one never got used." Maya stared at him. "Daniel, no pressure," he said quickly. "No strings, just, if you need somewhere to land for a while, this is yours. No rent, no questions. You get your own key. No staff, no foundation names, just privacy and a roof." Her heart thudded. "You can't just give me a house. I'm not giving it to you. I'm loaning it until you can stand on your feet. This isn't charity, Maya. It's a safe place for you and Elijah. That's all." She looked out the window. The house had a little swing on the porch. A welcome mat. The kind of place that looked like stability. Like peace. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Say yes." She turned back to him, eyes glistening. "You're making it really hard to walk away." "Good." They got out, and Maya carried Elijah inside. The house smelled like fresh paint and clean wood. Sunlight streamed through white curtains. It had 2 bedrooms, a working furnace, and a stocked fridge. When she set Elijah down on the couch, he immediately rolled over and curled up, sighing in contentment. Maya stood in the kitchen, gripping the counter. "You always do this. You make things feel easy when nothing in my life has ever been easy." Daniel leaned on the opposite counter. "Maybe it's time you stop fighting everything alone." She shook her head. "But your mother, she's already called me 6 times this morning," he said. "I sent her straight to voicemail. I'm done letting her dictate my life. And I'm sure as hell done letting her insult you. She said she'd ruin you." "She can try." Maya bit her lip. "I don't want to be the reason you lose anything." He stepped closer, voice low. "You were never the reason I lost anything, but you were the reason I ever had something worth fighting for." "No." Before she could reply, the doorbell rang. Daniel frowned. "I wasn't expecting anyone." Maya's stomach tightened. "If that's your mother, But it wasn't. A courier stood at the door, holding a manila envelope. Delivery for Daniel Harris. He signed for it, opened the envelope, and froze. "What is it?" Maya asked. He held up a letter with the Harris Foundation's seal. "She moved faster than I thought," he muttered. "She's called an emergency board meeting. They're threatening to suspend me from the chair if I continue associating with you." Maya's blood went cold. Daniel looked at her. "This is what I meant last night. She'll try everything. I didn't think it would be this fast." She turned away, heart pounding. "This is my fault." "No," he said firmly, coming to her side. "It's her fault. For trying to control me. For thinking your skin color makes you unworthy. She's wrong, Maya. And I'm done playing her game." "Ugh." She looked up at him, breath shaky. "If you fight her, you'll lose everything." He cupped her face. "Then let me lose it for something that matters." She wanted to push him away, to run. But instead, she let her forehead fall to his chest. For the first time in years, she let herself rest. Just for a moment. "I'm scared," she whispered. "So am I," he replied, "but I'm more scared of never trying." And somewhere, deep inside her, a window cracked open, not enough for light to flood in, but enough for her to breathe. The next morning, sunlight poured through the kitchen windows of the blue house, warming the tiled floor where Maya stood barefoot, stirring oatmeal in a dented saucepan. Elijah sat at the table, tapping a plastic spoon against his cereal bowl and humming a made-up tune. His cheeks had color again. His fever was gone. Maya smiled to herself, then quickly masked it. She didn't want to enjoy this too much, didn't want to get used to hot water, working heat, full cupboards. It felt like a borrowed life, and borrowed things always came with a deadline. Daniel entered through the side door, carrying a bag from a local bakery. "I brought cinnamon rolls, the kind you used to love." Maya raised an eyebrow. "You remember that?" He grinned. "You ate 6 in one sitting before finals junior year. You were convinced sugar improved your memory. But," she chuckled despite herself, "it didn't. I failed that exam, but you passed the class. And I passed because you tutored me in economics." They shared a brief, tender glance before Maya turned back to the stove. He set the bag on the table and sat beside Elijah, who squealed with delight at the sight of frosting. "I talked to a lawyer last night," Daniel said carefully. "She's helping me prepare for the board meeting." Maya's ladle paused in the pot. "And?" she asked, trying to keep her voice neutral. "And if they vote to suspend me, I'll be ready. I'm willing to resign if I have to." Maya turned, startled. "Daniel, no. I've already made my decision," he said calmly. "This foundation was built to help people like you and Elijah. If they've forgotten that, then maybe I don't belong there anymore. But it's your legacy. My father died believing in doing what's right. My mother twisted that legacy. It's time to untangle it." Maya's eyes filled, but she blinked them back. "I don't want you to burn down your life for me. You're not burning anything. You're building something better." Just then, Elijah pointed toward the window. "Snow." They both turned. A quiet storm had begun, soft flakes drifting down in lazy spirals. The forecast had mentioned flurries, but this looked like more. "I should pick up groceries," Maya said, reaching for her coat. "Just in case we get snowed in." Daniel stood too. "I'll go. You stay with him." "No," she said quickly. "I need to move. Clear my head." He hesitated, then nodded. "All right, take the car. I'll stay here." She looked at him, surprised. "You trust me with your car?" "I trust you with more than that." That stopped her cold. She met his gaze, heart skipping. She turned quickly and grabbed her keys before the heat behind her eyes turned to tears. At the store, Maya moved slowly through the aisles, ticking off mental lists: bread, milk, rice. She passed a mirror by the pharmacy counter and caught her reflection. She looked tired, not worn down the way she'd looked last week, but emotionally stretched, like a paper left out in the rain. As she paid for her groceries, her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "You may have fooled Daniel, but you'll never fool the board. We're watching you." She froze, heart thudding. She didn't respond. She couldn't. She stepped outside into the now blinding snowfall, gripping the grocery bags tight. Her boots slipped on the curb. She caught herself and hurried toward the SUV. Inside the car, she sat for a long moment, fingers trembling against the steering wheel. Vivian, it had to be her, or someone she sent. Maya started the car and drove home slowly, barely seeing the road. When she pulled into the driveway, Daniel came out with Elijah on his hip. "You okay?" he asked as she stepped out. She nodded too quickly. "Yeah, just slippery out there." He studied her face, unconvinced. She carried the bags inside and started putting things away, avoiding his eyes. But Daniel wasn't one to let silence win. "You got a message," he said quietly. "Didn't you?" She paused with a loaf of bread in her hands. "What makes you say that?" "I can see it in your face. That look you get when you're bracing for a fight." She set the bread down. "They think I'm manipulating you, that I'm some parasite. They don't know you, but they hold your future in their hands." Daniel crossed the room and took her hand. "Number? They don't. I do. And I'm choosing this. You. Elijah. Us." She looked away. "It won't be easy. Nothing worth it ever is." The next day, Daniel went to the board meeting. He left early, wearing the dark blue suit Maya used to love on him back in college. He kissed Elijah on the forehead, then kissed Maya's cheek. "I'll be back," he said. She nodded, standing in the doorway of the blue house, Elijah clinging to her leg. The hours passed slowly. The storm outside worsened. Power flickered once, then again. Maya lit candles and told Elijah stories from memory. Funny ones. Ones with talking bears and singing frogs. He laughed, and it lifted the weight from her shoulders, if only for a moment. Just after sunset, headlights cut through the snow. Maya opened the door before Daniel even knocked. He stepped inside, snow clinging to his shoulders. "Well?" she asked. He exhaled. "I resigned." Maya's stomach dropped. "You what?" "They gave me a choice, cut ties with you publicly or step down. I chose to walk." She stared at him, speechless. "I didn't need their approval," he said. "I needed my soul back." She rushed forward and hugged him, fierce and silent. They stood like that for a long time, Elijah peeking around the couch with wide eyes. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. "Now," Daniel said, pulling back to look at her, "we rebuild, together." And in the middle of that blue house, with the wind howling outside and their lives turned upside down, Maya felt something settle inside her for the first time in years. Not fear, not shame, but the fragile beginning of belonging. The snowstorm lingered for 2 more days, blanketing the neighborhood in a quiet hush. Trees bent under the weight of fresh powder. Roads lay untouched, frozen in stillness. Inside the blue house, time felt different, slower, almost sacred. Maya sat at the kitchen table in the early hours of the morning, sipping weak coffee from a chipped mug. She wore Daniel's flannel shirt over her thermal top, and it smelled faintly like him. Across from her, Elijah nibbled on a piece of toast, babbling a story to his stuffed rabbit. Daniel entered from the hallway, rubbing sleep from his eyes. His hair was tousled, his t-shirt wrinkled from sleep. Maya's eyes softened. The way he moved through the house now like he belonged, both comforted and unnerved her. "You're up early," he murmured, pouring himself coffee. "Couldn't sleep," she said. "You okay?" She nodded, then shook her head. "I don't know. It's like, the more peace I feel in this house, the more afraid I am it'll disappear." Daniel sat beside her, his knee brushing hers. "It won't. You can't promise that." "Doe, I can promise I'm not going anywhere." She wanted to believe him. She really did. He reached for her hand, gently. "What if we made this permanent? You and Elijah. Here. With me." Maya's breath caught. "Daniel, I'm not asking for answers now. Just think about it." Before she could respond, her phone buzzed on the table. A local number. She answered. "Miss Williams?" a man's voice asked. "This is Officer Grant with the Detroit Police Department. We received a report regarding your presence at the Harris Family Medical Center last week. We'd like to speak with you about a possible trespassing complaint." Maya's heart dropped. "Trespassing? I was invited. By Dr. Daniel Harris. I understand. This is likely a misunderstanding, but we'd like you to come in and clear it up." Maya hung up, eyes wide. Your mother filed a police report. Daniel's face hardened. Of course she did. She's trying to ruin me. She's trying to scare you. She's good at that. She won't stop, Daniel. She's going to push until she breaks something. Or someone. He stood. Then I'll push back. Maya stood too. You can't fight fire with fire when she owns the entire forest. Daniel looked at her, pain flashing in his eyes. So what do we do? Let her win? No, she said, her voice shaking. We outlast her. The next morning, Maya went to the station. Daniel offered to go with her, but she insisted on going alone. She needed to face this herself. Inside the station, Officer Grant greeted her with a neutral expression. Miss Williams, please, have a seat. She sat, hands folded tightly in her lap. The report claims you entered the medical center under false pretenses, seeking unauthorized medical treatment. I was invited by Dr. Harris, Maya said. My son had a high fever. He took us in after the pharmacy refused to help. The officer nodded, scribbling notes. Dr. Harris has already corroborated your account. We'll likely dismiss the complaint, but it's still on file. For now. Maya stood, her pride rattled but intact. Thank you, officer. As she stepped outside, the cold air hit her lungs like ice. Across the street, a black sedan idled. She recognized it instantly. Vivian's car. The tinted window rolled down. Vivian sat inside, wrapped in a sable coat, sunglasses hiding her eyes. You think this is over? She said coolly. You've cost my son everything, but I'll make sure you don't enjoy it. Maya didn't flinch. Your son made his own choices. Vivian's lips curled. He'll come crawling back. They always do, and when he does, you won't be waiting. You'll be gone, forgotten. Maya stepped closer. You think I'm afraid of you? You think I don't know how to survive women like you? I've survived worse. You're a stain on his legacy. I'm the truth he finally chose. Then, with that, Maya turned and walked away, her spine straight, her head high. Her breath steamed in the frozen air, but her blood ran warm. At home, Daniel met her at the door. How bad? She's trying everything. We'll try harder. That night, after Elijah was tucked in, Maya and Daniel sat on the couch, the room dimly lit by firelight. He wrapped an arm around her, and she leaned into him. She won't stop, she murmured. I don't need her to, he replied. I just need you. She looked up at him, eyes filled with both fear and fierce love. I used to think surviving was the goal, she whispered. But now I want more. What do you want, Maya? She hesitated, then said, peace, safety, family. Not just for Elijah, for me. You have that, he said, right here. Outside, the wind howled through the eaves, and snow whispered against the windows. But inside the blue house, warmth pulsed like a promise of fragile, stubborn hope that refused to die. They were no longer just surviving. They were starting to live. The days after the police station incident passed with a deceptive calm. The snow melted slowly under a pale winter sun, and for a brief moment, Maya allowed herself to believe the worst had passed. But peace, she had learned, often came before the storm. Daniel spent more time at the house now, helping with Elijah, cooking dinner, even fixing the broken door to the laundry closet without being asked. It was domestic, easy, and that terrified Maya more than she admitted. It wasn't just about fear of Vivian anymore, it was fear of being happy, only to lose it all again. On Friday morning, a formal envelope arrived in the mailbox, heavy, cream-colored paper with the Harris Foundation seal embossed in gold. Maya stood on the porch staring at it, unsure whether to open it or throw it into the snow. She brought it inside, Elijah trailing after her with sticky fingers from breakfast syrup. Daniel looked up from the kitchen table. What's that? She handed it to him without a word. He opened it slowly, his brows drawing together as he read. They're inviting me to the annual winter gala, he said, voice unreadable. And you, as my guest. Maya's heart thudded. That's not a gesture of peace, she said. No, it's bait. She folded her arms. What do they want? For me to show up so they can parade me around as the charity case who ruined you. Daniel shook his head. Or maybe they think they can scare you into staying away. Maya stared at the envelope. The words on it felt cold, calculated. But something inside her stirred, not fear. Defiance. I want to go. Daniel blinked. You do? She nodded slowly. They expect me to hide, to shrink, to stay invisible. Maybe it's time I show them I'm not. He smiled, proud. You'll look incredible in anything, but if you want, we can go shopping. I'm not trying to impress them. I know, but that doesn't mean you can't look like the woman who's changing my life. Later that afternoon, they took Elijah to a friend's house, someone from the neighborhood who owed Daniel more than one favor. Then they drove into downtown Detroit. The boutique Daniel brought her to was small, elegant, the kind of place with champagne flutes by the dressing rooms and soft music playing in the background. Maya felt out of place the moment she stepped inside, but Daniel's hand on her back kept her steady. An older saleswoman approached, warm and efficient. You must be Dr. Harris. We've pulled a few selections for your guest. Maya stepped into the changing room, trying on gown after gown, some too bright, some too tight, until she emerged in a deep emerald satin dress that hugged her curves and shimmered against her skin. Daniel looked up and went quiet. Well? She asked. He stood slowly, eyes wide. You look like the truth. They've spent their whole lives denying. She blushed. That's a big compliment. It's not a compliment. It's a fact. The gala was held in a historic hotel ballroom, a place that oozed old money and quiet power. Chandeliers sparkled above. Waiters in tuxedos carried trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Maya had been to galas once before, cleaning up after them. Heads turned the moment they entered. Daniel wore a classic black tuxedo, but it was Maya who drew every gaze. She walked beside him, chin lifted, heart pounding like a drum. Every step echoed with years of humiliation, sacrifice, and stubborn survival. She caught Vivian near the back of the room, talking to a senator's wife. Their eyes met. Vivian's face tightened, her lips moved, but the smile never reached her eyes. Daniel leaned in. Want to leave? Maya squared her shoulders. Number, let's find our table. As they settled in, Maya noticed people whispering. Most were polite. A few openly stared. But she held her ground, forcing herself to breathe, to exist in a space never built for her. Dinner passed in tense pleasantries. Daniel was the perfect gentleman, gracious, intelligent, calm. He never let go of her hand under the table. He never once flinched. Midway through the evening, the host stepped up to the podium. A hush fell over the room. Before we begin the awards portion of the evening, I'd like to acknowledge a few special guests. Maya braced herself, including Dr. Daniel Harris, whose decision to step down as chair was met with mixed reactions but unwavering principle. Polite applause. And joining him tonight, a woman whose strength and dignity remind us that compassion and courage walk hand in hand, Miss Maya Williams. There was a pause, then scattered claps, some genuine, some grudging. Maya flushed, unsure how to respond. Daniel stood and helped her to her feet. Let them see you, he whispered. She did. And in that moment, she stopped being afraid. After the speeches, Vivian approached their table. Maya, she said coolly, you clean up well. Maya smiled. So do snakes in the grass. Daniel choked on his drink. Vivian's eyes narrowed. You think you've won? I'm not playing your game, Maya said calmly. But I won't disappear either. Vivian looked at her son. And you? You really intend to throw away your name for this? Daniel stood, proud. I'm not throwing it away. I'm giving it new meaning. Vivian scoffed. You'll regret this. Not for a second, he said. Vivian turned on her heel and walked away, her heels clicking like gunshots on marble. As the music resumed and couples began to dance, Daniel turned to Maya. May I have this dance? I don't know how to waltz. Good, neither do I. Daughter. He led her to the floor, arms around her waist, her hand on his shoulder. Around them, the world kept spinning. Rich people, gossip, champagne, but in that moment, Maya didn't feel small. She felt chosen, not because of pity, but because of love, because she'd stood her ground, because she was no longer afraid to take up space. The morning after the gala arrived with a strange stillness. Maya lay in bed, eyes open, staring at the ceiling of the blue house. Daniel's steady breathing beside her was both a comfort and a question. She had never planned to be here, not in this bed, not in this life. Last night still echoed through her, the way people looked at her, the hush that followed her name, the chill in Vivian's voice, and the burn of her own quiet pride. She had expected humiliation. Instead, she had found clarity. She slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Daniel, and tiptoed into Elijah's room. He was still asleep, one chubby hand wrapped around his stuffed rabbit, mouth open slightly in peaceful rest. She sat beside him, brushing a lock of hair from his forehead. "You called him Ba," she whispered, and he didn't flinch. She stayed there for a while, heart full and aching. By the time Daniel woke, she was making pancakes in the kitchen. He appeared in the doorway, shirt rumpled, barefoot, eyes soft with sleep and something else, something that frightened her more than his tuxedo smile, vulnerability. "Morning," he said, voice low. "You sleep okay?" she asked. He nodded, then stepped behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Last night was unexpected," she offered. "Incredible," he countered. "You were incredible." She flipped a pancake and turned to face him. "So what now, Daniel?" "What do you mean?" "You left the board. You're out of your mother's world. But what's next for you?" He paused. "I've been thinking about that, about what I want to build now that I'm free." "And what's that?" "A clinic. One that doesn't turn away single mothers. One that operates without politics or profit. And I want you to help me run it." She blinked. "I'm not a doctor. You're someone who's lived it, who knows the fight. I need that perspective." "Nah." Her hands trembled slightly as she set down the spatula. "You're serious." "I'm dead serious." Before she could respond, there was a knock at the door. They both froze. Maya's instincts flared. "You expecting someone?" Daniel shook his head. She moved cautiously to the window and peered out. A tall woman in a gray suit stood on the porch. She held a leather folder and wore a neutral expression. Maya opened the door slightly. "Can I help you?" "Miss Williams, I'm Margaret Colby. I represent the Harris Family Trust." Maya's stomach twisted. "Vivian sent you?" "I was hired by the board, not Mrs. Harris. May I come in?" Daniel stepped forward. "What's this about?" Margaret looked at him. "There's been a proposal made regarding your son's trust and several foundation-linked accounts. It affects you both." They let her in. At the table, she laid out documents. Maya didn't understand all the legal jargon, but the gist was clear. Vivian had pulled strings to freeze Daniel's access to family assets, leveraging his resignation as justification. "They're claiming breach of fiduciary duty," Margaret explained. "They believe your actions were reckless and compromised the foundation's image." Maya stood abruptly. "You mean by loving someone like me?" Margaret hesitated. "Unofficially? Yes." Daniel's yaff clenched. "I've already walked away from their money. Some of it, yes. But this extends beyond your position. Your investments, even Elijah's educational trust. Everything's entangled." "Why would they target my son?" Maya demanded. "To scare you," Daniel said darkly. "To punish me." Margaret tapped the papers. "There's an arbitration hearing in 2 weeks. If you can prove your relationship is authentic, not a publicity stunt, they'll have a harder time making these restrictions permanent." "Will?" Maya folded her arms. "So now we have to prove we're real?" Margaret met her eyes. "They're counting on you cracking, on you walking away to protect him." Maya's throat tightened. "They don't know how much I've already survived." Margaret closed her folder. "Then prove it. I'll be in touch." After she left, the house felt smaller, the air heavier. "I can't let this ruin your future," Maya said, pacing. Daniel followed her. "You are my future. You could fight this without me." I don't want to." She turned to face him. "I don't want Elijah to grow up thinking he cost you everything." Daniel stepped closer. "What if he grows up knowing he was the reason I found what really mattered?" She bit her lip, tears threatening. "You deserve peace. So do you. And we deserve it together." Later that night, as Elijah slept, Maya sat on the porch alone. Snow had melted into slush, and the wind carried whispers of spring. She pulled Daniel's flannel tighter around her shoulders, staring into the quiet dark. Daniel came out with 2 mugs of tea. He handed one to her. "Still want to run?" he asked gently. She shook her head. "Not this time." They sat in silence, side by side. "I used to think love was about sacrifice," she murmured, "about giving up what you wanted to protect the ones you loved. And now? Now I think real love doesn't ask you to disappear. It asks you to show up, even when it's hard. Dah. Daniel reached over and took her hand. Then let's keep showing up. Every day. She looked at him, heart raw and open. Yes, she said, even when it burns. And in that moment, with the wind whispering past them and their fingers intertwined, they made an unspoken vow not just to endure, but to rise, together. 1 week before the arbitration hearing, the air around the blue house turned taut with anticipation. The stillness of late winter clung to the edges of the days, and Maya could feel its weight behind every quiet moment. It was a hush before impact, before everything they'd built was either proven or shattered. Daniel spent most of his time in calls with lawyers and advisors. His voice low, steady. Maya spent her days with Elijah, taking long walks, cleaning corners of the house she'd ignored, and rereading the letter Daniel had written her the night after the gala, the one where he promised not a perfect life, but a real one. Maya didn't trust calm. She had lived too long in chaos, and yet, as she stood in the kitchen one morning, watching Elijah chase sunlight through the window, she caught herself hoping. And it frightened her. A knock at the door broke the silence. She opened it to find a tall woman with kind eyes and a camera bag slung over her shoulder. "Miss Williams? I'm Ruth Everett." The Foundation's mediator requested updated portraits of Dr. Harris and his partner. Proof of domestic life. Maya stared. "They want photos of us? Like, proof of love?" Ruth smiled apologetically. "It's more common than you think. It helps humanize the case. Shows authenticity." Maya hesitated. "Fine, but don't expect posed smiles." "Good. The real moments are the ones that matter." Ruth sat up in the living room, adjusting the light, as Elijah clambered onto Daniel's lap. Daniel, who had just arrived from a long meeting, still wore his suit jacket but had loosened the tie. "All right," Ruth said, lifting her camera. "Just be yourselves." At first, Maya felt stiff, aware of every movement. But then Elijah giggled as Daniel whispered something in his ear. Maya leaned into Daniel's shoulder, her eyes softening, and slowly, the walls came down. Ruth captured a moment where Maya brushed Elijah's hair from his face, another where Daniel rested his chin on Maya's temple. She clicked one final shot as Maya looked up at Daniel with quiet adoration, something even she hadn't realized was showing. After Ruth packed up, she handed Maya a business card. "They'll use these to try to prove you're either a storybook couple or a lie. But I've been photographing people a long time. What you have, it's not fake." Maya held her gaze. "Thank you." That night, Daniel lit a fire in the fireplace, though the chill outside had softened. They sat on the couch, Elijah fast asleep in his room, the photos still fresh in their minds. "I never thought our love would need to be proven," Maya said. Daniel nodded. "We've always had to work twice as hard just to be seen as equal." "May, do you think they'll believe us?" "I don't care if they believe us. I care that we believe us." She rested her head on his shoulder. "I keep replaying everything in my mind. Every moment where I should have walked away to protect you. I never wanted protection. I wanted you." Maya fell silent, the fire crackling beside them. Then softly, she said, "There's something I haven't told you." Daniel turned. "What is it?" She swallowed. "I had a job offer in Chicago. Before all this, an NGO. They wanted someone who'd been through the system, someone who could speak from experience." He nodded slowly. "And you didn't tell me because I didn't want to complicate things, because I didn't know if I'd still be here." Daniel's voice was even. "And now? I don't know." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I want you to take it." Maya stared. "What?" "If it's something you want, if it gives you purpose, you should go. I'll support you. We can figure it out." "No." "You'd stay here?" "I'd come with you." She blinked, stunned. "I'm not anchored to Detroit anymore," he said. "My work is portable. We could build something new, together." The thought of starting fresh, away from Vivian's shadow, stirred something inside her. But so did fear. What if we go and fail? Daniel looked at her. What if we go and finally live? The next day, Maya met with Margaret, the lawyer who had taken her case on pro bono after seeing her speak at a community forum Daniel hosted last fall. They reviewed the timeline, the documents, and the testimonies prepared. "You'll be asked about your past," Margaret warned gently. "Why you left him, why you returned, whether this is real or survival. I can handle that, Maya said. They'll try to twist your son into a bargaining chip. Lick. Maya's jaw tightened. He's not a strategy. He's my child. I know, but they don't play fair. I don't need them to. As the hearing drew closer, Maya found herself thinking less about court and more about her own growth. She remembered who she had been when she walked into that pharmacy weeks ago, desperate, ashamed, alone, and who she was now, a woman standing shoulder to shoulder with a man who loved her, and a child who trusted her heart. 2 days before the hearing, Daniel came home with a small box. Maya opened it to find a necklace, delicate silver, with a tiny pendant shaped like a flame. For the fire inside you, he said, the one that's kept you going. She didn't cry, though she wanted to. She reached up and kissed him instead, and in that kiss, they found not resolution but readiness. They were no longer bracing for the storm. They were walking straight into it. Together, the courthouse in downtown Detroit stood like a monument to order, its granite columns cold under the sharp morning sun. Maya had passed it hundreds of times before, never imagining she would one day walk through its doors with her entire life under scrutiny. As they stepped inside, Elijah gripped her hand tightly, his other hand holding onto his stuffed rabbit. Daniel walked beside them in a charcoal suit, one hand protectively placed on Maya's back. It was meant to comfort, but Maya felt every eye in the lobby turn toward them like they were walking into a coliseum, not a courtroom. Margaret met them by the elevators, her expression calm but firm. They've already filed a motion questioning your cohabitation. Their legal team is going to push for separation of assets and invalidate Daniel's authority over his own trust. They're trying to say I'm after his money, Maya said, jaw tight. Margaret nodded, and that he's not thinking clearly, driven by emotion. But we have testimony, photos, and witnesses ready. Just stay composed. Speak your truth. That's all you need to do. The courtroom itself was smaller than Maya expected, but it felt massive when they entered. The board members sat in a row behind polished desks, Vivian front and center, her posture perfect, her expression stone. She wore black mourning, perhaps, for the name she believed her son was desecrating. Daniel offered Maya a seat beside him at the defense table. Margaret opened her folder, flipping to the first page of the brief. Maya tried not to look at the other side of the room, but her eyes found Vivian's anyway. Their gazes met, and for a brief moment, there was something like pity in the older woman's expression. Or perhaps that was just Maya's hope. The judge entered. The bailiff called the room to order, and it began. The prosecution wasted no time. A middle-aged attorney named Charles Grant stood and launched into a monologue about heritage, legacy, and the risks of emotional entanglements clouding financial responsibility. Dr. Daniel Harris has, in recent months, made a series of decisions that not only contradict the best interests of the Harris Foundation, but call into question his capacity to manage generational assets with discernment. He turned slightly toward Maya without ever looking directly at her. This change in behavior conveniently coincides with the reappearance of Maya Williams, an unemployed single mother with no legal, familial, or fiduciary ties to the foundation. Maya's blood boiled, but she sat still, remembering Margaret's warning, composure is power. When it was their turn, Margaret stood. Miss Williams has no claim to the foundation's assets. She is not here to inherit or interfere. She is here because she was invited by the very man this board now seeks to control like a child incapable of his own choices. The board shifted uncomfortably. Margaret continued. Our opponents speak of legacy. But what greater legacy is there than honoring truth, loyalty, and compassion? Dr. Harris has not lost his way. He's found it. Then came the testimony. Daniel spoke first, calm, clear. He talked about his decision to step down from the board, his father's original mission, and how he'd strayed from it chasing approval. My mother taught me to protect the family name, he said, glancing toward Vivian. But my father taught me to protect people. I believe Maya does the same. Next was Maya. She took the stand, hands clenched in her lap. Years ago, I left Daniel because I believed I didn't belong in his world. His mother convinced me my presence would ruin him, and for a long time, I believed her. She looked at the board, at Vivian, directly now. But I've raised a child on my own. I've worked jobs no one wanted. I've waited in clinics. begged for help at pharmacies, and learned to survive in silence. I don't want Daniel's money. I want his respect, and he has mine. There was a quiet hush. Even the judge looked momentarily moved. Then came the moment they hadn't prepared for. Vivian requested to speak. The room stilled. Even Margaret seemed surprised. The judge allowed it. Vivian stood slowly. Her voice, when she spoke, was not cold but hollow. I have spent my life building something meant to last. My husband, God rest him, believed in generosity. I believed in caution. Maybe too much. She turned toward Maya. I believed you were a threat. Not because of your background, but because of what love can do to a man with purpose. Maya didn't flinch. Vivian's gaze moved to Daniel, but perhaps the bigger threat was me, my fear, my desire to control. And then, quietly, you have made your choice. And now, so will I. She returned to her seat without another word. After a recess, the judge returned with a decision. The court finds no grounds to question the authenticity of the relationship between Dr. Harris and Miss Williams. The financial restrictions imposed by the board are lifted effective immediately. Furthermore, this court recommends that the Harris Foundation reassess its policies to ensure they align with the inclusive values it claims to represent. Maya exhaled for the first time in hours. Daniel reached over and squeezed her hand. They had won. Outside the courthouse, the sun was bright, blinding. Reporters circled nearby, but Daniel waved them off. They walked to the car hand in hand. I don't know what happens next, Maya said. We live, Daniel replied. We love, we build. No, and if they come at us again? He smiled. Then we stand. Together. As they drove away from the courthouse, Elijah asleep in his car seat, Maya glanced at the man beside her, the one who had chosen her again and again, not out of obligation, but faith. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't just feel strong. She felt free. The wind had shifted, not just in temperature, but in spirit. After the courtroom battle, Maya found herself walking differently, back a little straighter, breath a little deeper. It wasn't just about winning the case. It was about reclaiming a voice she'd once buried under years of silence, shame, and struggle. Detroit hadn't changed overnight, but something in her had. 2 weeks had passed since the hearing. The media had already moved on. Daniel refused interviews. Vivian returned to her estate in Bloomfield Hills and hadn't reached out since. Silence, in this case, was a mercy. But Maya knew better than to believe silence meant surrender. This peace, it was something she and Daniel would have to protect, daily. Daniel had thrown himself into the project they'd spoken about in passing. The clinic. Not a hospital, not a business, but a sanctuary. A place that didn't measure care by credit score or zip code. And he wanted Maya at the center of it. They sat in the empty lot on the east side, where a worn-down community center used to stand before it caught fire and was never rebuilt. It was surrounded by old homes, many of them crumbling but occupied by people who had weathered storms worse than any economic downturn. Grandmothers, veterans, single mothers like her. Maya stood in the middle of the lot, her boots crunching on gravel, Elijah's mittened hand in hers. The cold didn't bite the way it once had. She was too full of purpose to notice it. Daniel stepped beside her with a rolled-up blueprint in one hand and coffee in the other. He handed her the cup and unrolled the plan on the hood of the car. Phase 1, he said, pointing. Reception, 3 exam rooms, 1 community classroom. Over here, the resource center, legal help, job board, mental health referrals. She nodded, sipping. And who's going to run all this? You, he said simply. Well, we, but mostly you. You know what people need because you've needed it. I didn't go to school for this. You went to life for this. That's harder. She looked over the sketches. It was real now, tangible. What do we call it? She asked. Daniel paused, then smiled. The Elijah Center. Her breath caught. He shrugged. He's the reason we found our way back. Let's build something in his name that outlives us both. Later that evening, back at the house, Maya found herself going through an old box of letters. Most were from her college days, torn edges, faded ink, memories of who she once was and who she might have been. At the bottom of the box was a photo. Her and Daniel, freshman year. arms slung over each other, both laughing, faces full of futures they hadn't yet lived. She stared at it for a long while. She still hadn't told him everything. Not about the day she left him, not about the envelope his mother gave her containing a check and a note that read, "For your silence," and his future. She'd torn it in half, never spent a dime. But she also never told him. He'd asked before. The night at the clinic. She'd changed the subject. But now, it burned in her chest. That night, after Elijah had fallen asleep watching a cartoon, Maya found Daniel in the living room, reviewing architectural models. "Can we talk?" she asked. He looked up. "Always. Ju." She sat beside him, holding the photo. "I never told you the real reason I left." Daniel's brow furrowed. "I figured it was pressure. Shame. It was more than that," she said softly. "Your mother gave me a check. A disgusting amount of money. Told me if I loved you, I'd walk away." His body tensed. "I didn't take it," she said quickly. "I never wanted her money." But her words stuck. "She said you'd never look at me the same if I dragged your name through the mud." Daniel was silent. "I was 21, broke, terrified. And I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought disappearing would protect you." He exhaled slowly. "I wish you'd told me sooner. I was ashamed, not of taking the money I didn't, but of letting her scare me." Daniel looked at her with eyes full of memory and pain. "You didn't drag me down, Maya. You made me human. And I let you walk away because I didn't fight hard enough to understand." They sat in silence, the old photo between them like a bridge to their younger selves. Finally, he said, "Let's never keep secrets again." She nodded. "Even the ugly parts. Especially those." The next morning, they visited the city council with their proposal for the Elijah Center. Margaret had prepped them, coached their presentation, and made sure every form was airtight. Maya wore her best coat, hair pulled back, eyes sharp. The council listened. Daniel explained the budget, the blueprint, the long-term impact. Maya spoke of the gaps in care, the nights she had waited in ERs with Elijah burning up, the doors that stayed closed because she didn't have the right insurance or a permanent address. "This center won't fix everything," she said, voice steady. "But it's a start. And it will tell people, especially women like me, that we see them, that their lives matter, that they are not invisible." The room was quiet when she finished. Then someone at the end of the table, an older black woman with silver hair and reading glasses, said, "Approved." The rest followed. Outside, in the cold, Daniel whooped and lifted Elijah in the air while Maya laughed for the first time in what felt like years. "We did it," he said. She grabbed his hand, holding it tight. "No," she said, "we're just getting started." The old community center lot was now a hive of activity. In just 3 weeks since the city council approved their proposal, permits were processed, the ground was cleared, and construction had begun. The sight of machinery, men in hard hats, and the clatter of scaffolding filled the neighborhood with a strange kind of hope, one that buzzed through the air like spring's early promise. Every morning, Maya stood on the sidewalk, coffee in hand, watching the foundation being laid. Daniel joined her when he wasn't buried in calls with suppliers, donors, and engineers. Elijah, wearing his bright yellow boots, loved visiting the site, calling it his building, as if it had sprouted just for him. But even with all the progress, the past never let go so easily. One afternoon, as Maya was finalizing a shipment of medical equipment in the temporary trailer office they had set up near the construction site, she received an unexpected call. "Miss Williams?" the voice asked. "Yes? This is Detective Genevieve Morgan from the Detroit Police Department. We need to speak with you about an incident concerning a Mr. Matthew Graves." Maya went still. That name, her late husband's name. She gripped the edge of the table. "What is this about?" "There's been new information surfaced regarding the crash that took his life. I thought it was closed years ago." "It was, but we believe it may not have been an accident." Maya's legs buckled, and she sat down. Genevieve continued, "We'd like you to come in, if you're willing, tomorrow morning." Maya hung up slowly and stared into space. The memory of that night rushed back like a storm. The phone call, the hospital corridor, Elijah only a few months old, her husband already gone. Daniel found her there 20 minutes later, pale and quiet. "What is it?" he asked gently. She handed him the paper where she had scribbled the detective's name. "They think Matt's crash wasn't an accident." Ugh. Daniel's brows furrowed. "After all this time?" She nodded. "And I don't know what to think." He sat beside her. "You want me to come with you?" "Yes. But I also want to go alone. At least at first." He didn't argue. He just reached for her hand and held it. The next morning, Maya sat across from Detective Morgan in a modest office at the station. The woman was middle-aged, with a calm presence and eyes that missed nothing. "We reopened the case based on a tip we received from a former insurance investigator," she said. "Your husband's brakes had been tampered with." Maya's breath caught. "You're sure?" "We found inconsistencies in the repair history of his car, things that should have raised red flags at the time." Maya shook her head. "But why?" Matt was. He was a social worker. He barely made enough to cover rent. Morgan nodded. "That's what we're trying to understand. Did he mention anything suspicious before the accident?" Maya thought hard. He was stressed, but that wasn't new. He worked with foster youth. The system wore him down. But he didn't talk much about it, not specifics. "We're not ruling out retaliation," Morgan said. "He was investigating complaints against a privately run group home that shut down weeks after his death." Maya's stomach turned. "Someone wanted to silence him?" she whispered. "It's a possibility." "No." Morgan slid a folder across the table. "These are photos from the group home's closure and some notes your husband kept. We believe you might recognize something useful." Maya left the station trembling. Daniel was waiting in the car, engine running. "What happened?" he asked, immediately reading her face. She handed him the folder. "They think Matt was murdered." Daniel's eyes scanned the pages, then looked at her. "We need to find out who did this." Over the following days, Maya plunged into her late husband's world-old emails, scribbled notebooks, case files buried in their attic. She found a pattern. Reports of neglect, abuse, children who vanished from the system. And at the center, a name she hadn't expected to see. Wallace Holdings. Daniel went rigid when he saw it. "That's one of my family's subsidiary firms." Maya stared at him. "Are you sure?" "They owned a stake in a dozen care facilities before I took over. I distanced myself from most of them, but this was buried." Together, they compiled everything. Margaret connected them with a journalist who specialized in child welfare investigations. The woman's eyes lit up when she saw the files. "I've been chasing Wallace Holdings for 5 years, she said. "This could blow it open." "But we're not just after a story," Maya said. "We want justice." "You'll get both." The article dropped 3 days later. Harris family subsidiary linked to abusive foster homes. Whistleblower died in accidental crash. It went viral within hours. Maya didn't care about the media storm. She cared about the ripple effect. Former foster youth reached out. A retired employee from the group home called her anonymously, confirming Matt's suspicions. The police reopened the investigation officially. Vivian was dragged back into the public eye not for Daniel's choices, but for her own. And Daniel? He stood beside Maya at the press conference. "My family's legacy will not be used to shield cruelty," he said to the crowd. "We will cooperate fully with the investigation and redirect all profits from those facilities into child advocacy programs and mental health support." Maya watched him speak and felt a deep, slow ache in her chest, not from pain, but from pride. That night, Elijah crawled into bed with them, scared from the news playing in the other room. Maya pulled him close. Daniel wrapped his arms around them both. "You did it," Daniel whispered. "You gave him justice." "No," she whispered back. "We did." And for the first time since Matt's death, Maya closed her eyes and let herself grieve fully, because the silence that had once haunted her was now filled with purpose, and the love she had feared would break her had, instead, rebuilt her. Detroit didn't slow down after the scandal broke. The city pulsed louder than ever, with headlines bleeding through every screen, every cafe whisper, every boardroom agenda. But inside the Blue House, where love had been hard-earned and silence replaced with justice, Maya and Daniel moved with quiet determination. The Elijah Center's foundation had been laid. Beams were rising. Volunteers, mostly from the neighborhood, showed up daily with paint-streaked clothes and unshakable spirits. Maya worked longer hours, organizing donations, setting up community panels, writing grant proposals with Margaret's help. But with exposure came danger. One cold afternoon, as Maya returned from the community college where she'd been speaking about systemic neglect in child welfare, she found a white envelope tucked beneath her windshield wiper. No stamp. No return address. She opened it cautiously. Typed in blocky font were 6 words. Stop digging. Or someone else D's. Oh. Her stomach dropped. She drove straight to the police station, hands shaking, jaw clenched. Detective Morgan took the threat seriously. "You're rattling old ghosts," she said. "Powerful ones. Then they're scared," Maya replied, voice steady despite the tremble in her hands. "That means we're getting close." Still, that night she double-checked the locks. She pulled Elijah's bed closer to her own. Daniel found her in the living room, staring out into the snow-dark street, arms crossed tight. He didn't speak. He just wrapped a blanket around her shoulders and stood beside her. "We could leave," he said quietly. "Start over in Chicago or California, somewhere no one knows us." She shook her head. "Running is what they expect, and what I promised myself I'd never do again." He nodded, kissed her temple, and whispered, "Then we stay, and we fight." The next day, Vivian called. It was the first time Maya had heard her voice since the courtroom. "We need to speak," Vivian said curtly, face to face. Maya hesitated. "Why now?" "Because my name is being dragged, and your family is in danger. I assume you still care about both." Maya agreed to meet her at a private tea room in a quiet hotel downtown. Daniel insisted on waiting in the lobby. Vivian wore navy wool, a string of pearls, and a gaze that had weathered far more than public scandal. She looked older, not broken, but softened just slightly. "I didn't know about Wallace Holdings," she began, "not the full extent." "You owned the company," Maya replied. "I signed papers. I trusted people who built divisions behind my back. I was busy managing optics. I didn't see what was festering underneath." Maya remained silent. Vivian leaned forward. "You think I'm here to apologize? I'm not. I came to warn you. The people you're challenging these aren't just greedy men. They're dangerous. Ruthless. Mine. I already received a warning," Maya said, sliding the photo of the threat across the table. Vivian's mouth tightened. "You need to protect Elijah. That's all I ask." Maya's eyes narrowed. "I am." Vivian stood slowly, her voice low. "You may not believe this, but I never hated you. I hated the reflection of what you made my son believe he could become someone human. Someone not controlled by legacy. You taught him to fear softness. I taught him to survive." Vivian left without another word. Maya sat in the silence for a long time before returning to Daniel in the lobby. He stood when he saw her, hand reaching for hers before he even asked what happened. Later that night, Maya pulled out an old journal from college. Between the pages was a letter she'd written Daniel but never mailed. It was a raw, unfinished confession, a love letter soaked in fear. She handed it to him. He read it by the firelight, his expression unreadable. "You were protecting me back then," he said quietly. "I thought I was," Maya whispered, "but maybe I was just protecting myself from the guilt of dragging you down. You never dragged me anywhere. You were the only thing that made me feel real." The next day, Margaret called with an update. Detective Morgan found a connection between Wallace Holdings and a former board member, a man named Paul Wickham. He resigned quietly, 6 months before Matt's crash. Turns out, Matt had submitted a complaint directly naming him. Maya's chest tightened. He knew. He did. And Wickham has been hiding overseas under the radar. We've tracked him down. Interpol is involved now. The case was turning, and so was the tide. That Sunday, Maya and Daniel stood before a crowd of over 200 in a half-renovated school gym, hosting their first Elijah Center community forum. News cameras lined the back walls, but Maya ignored them. Her focus was on the women sitting in the front rows, the ones with tired eyes and children on their laps, the ones she had once been. She told her story. Not the polished version, but the truth. "Justice," she said into the microphone, "isn't a clean thing. It doesn't come with ribbons or applause. It's messy. It asks you to bleed in public, to scream when you've been trained to whisper." She looked at the crowd. "But it's also the most sacred thing we can give each other." The applause was quiet at first, then rose in waves. Afterward, A young mother approached her, eyes brimming. "You gave me hope," she whispered. And Maya, holding her hand, replied, "Number, you already had it. You just needed a place to believe again." That night, Daniel tucked Elijah into bed, whispering stories about builders and dragons and brave boys who asked the hard questions. Maya watched from the doorway, heart stretched wide. She had feared her scars would define her, but now she saw those scars were roadmaps, not to what she'd lost, but to everything she was finally building. Winter loosened its grip, and the first hints of spring pushed through the Detroit chill. Daffodils bloomed stubbornly along broken sidewalks. Children dared to play outside without coats. Hope, it seemed, had become contagious. But beneath the gentle thaw, something darker stirred. 3 weeks after the forum, just as momentum for the Elijah Center had begun to soar, donations increasing, volunteer applications flooding in, and a major feature planned on national television, Maya received a call in the middle of the night. It was from Jamal, a former high school classmate of Daniel's and one of the site supervisors for the construction project. "Maya," he said, breath ragged, "the center, it's on fire." She bolted upright, heart pounding. "No, they think it was arson. I saw someone run, but I couldn't catch them." Daniel was already awake, grabbing keys, pulling on clothes, not needing to ask what was wrong. They drove in silence, Elijah asleep in the back seat, unaware that the building named after him was now engulfed in flames. When they arrived, the night air was thick with smoke. Fire trucks blinked red and blue against the black sky. The framework of the Elijah Center, once so solid and proud, now bowed inward, like a broken promise. Maya stood in front of the burning structure, breath frozen. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just stared. Daniel approached her, placing a steady hand on her back. "We'll rebuild," he said quietly. But Maya didn't answer. Her mind raced not just with grief, but with fury. Someone had done this deliberately. Someone had sent a message. Later, back at the house, after hours of questioning by police and watching the charred footage on repeat, she finally broke. "I knew this would happen," she said, pacing the living room. "The threats, the envelope, the warning from Vivian. I should have been prepared." "You were prepared," Daniel said calmly. "You did everything right. They're the ones who chose violence. I should have protected it better." "You protected the people," he said firmly. "The mission isn't dead. The building was a shell. We are the fire, Maya, not them." But his words, though true, couldn't quiet the ache in her chest. The next morning, Maya called a press conference. She refused to let the story twist into rumors. She stood outside the still smoking ruins of the center, camera crews swarming, reporters murmuring. She didn't flinch. "This wasn't an accident," she said into the mic. "It was fear. Fear of what justice looks like when it takes root in the hearts of everyday people. But let me be clear. Fire can destroy wood and paint. It cannot burn down purpose. It cannot erase love." The crowd murmured. Maya pressed on. "We are rebuilding. We are not backing down. If anything, we're expanding. Because what you meant for ashes will become the very foundation of something bigger." Cheers erupted. Some cried. Others clapped. A woman in the back raised a sign that read, "We are Elijah." Back home, while Elijah napped, Maya found a package on the porch. New return address. New postage. She opened it slowly. Inside was a photo of her speaking at the forum. A red X was drawn across her face. Beneath it, typed in the same blocky font, "Next time, it won't be your building." Maya sat down hard, the threat burning hotter than any fire. When Daniel came home, she showed him. He didn't speak for a moment. Then, "We're getting security, armed, and you're not going anywhere alone. But if we hide..." "I'm not saying hide, I'm saying fight smarter." Margaret contacted the authorities again. The threat was now official. Detective Morgan assigned a protective detail. Daniel hired private security. Vivian even sent a message, cryptic, but firm, "Do not let them win." In the days that followed, something strange happened. Support doubled. A GoFundMe set up by a local teen reached $200,000 in 3 days. Construction companies offered free labor. Churches opened their halls for temporary classes and services. And then came the call Maya never expected. A man named Carlos Evans, CEO of a national health chain, reached out. I saw the coverage, he said. I lost my sister to neglect in a group home. I've been donating silently to advocacy groups for years, but now I want to build with you. Maya blinked. You mean? I mean a new Elijah Center. Bigger. In 3 cities to start: Detroit, Cleveland, Chicago. You lead. I fund. Maya couldn't speak. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Is that a yes? Carlos asked gently. It's a hell yes, she whispered. That night, she sat on the porch, watching the stars. Elijah curled in her lap. Daniel stepped outside, 2 mugs of tea in hand. You okay? She nodded. We lost a building, but we gained an army. He sat beside her. You know what I realized today? What? You're not the woman who needed help at the pharmacy anymore. She smiled faintly. And you're not the man who stood behind her. You're beside me now. They sat in the quiet, the kind of peace forged through battle, not given freely. Elijah stirred, half asleep. Mama? Yes, baby. Will my building have slides? Maya laughed softly, brushing his hair back. Whatever you want, sweetheart. Daniel kissed the top of Elijah's head. And what if your mama runs for city council next year? Maya turned sharply. What? I'm serious. You've got the fire. The people believe in you. And this city needs someone who's lived what they legislate. Oh? Maya looked out over the city she once feared would break her. Maybe it was time she shaped it instead. The news hit every major outlet by morning. Local activist and Elijah Center founder, Maya Williams, considers city council run. Daniel hadn't meant to trigger a movement with his offhand comment, but the fire in Maya's eyes told him something had awakened. She didn't deny it when the press called, didn't laugh it off when the community asked. Instead, she listened, and what she heard was something deeper than encouragement. It was a call. Still, politics had always seemed a world she had no place in, built for the polished, the privileged, not for single mothers with second-hand shoes and a past haunted by poverty. But Maya had learned long ago that sometimes the people least expected to lead were the ones most needed. She met with Margaret in the early morning. The 2 women seated at the old wooden table in the temporary Elijah Center office. The smell of coffee thick in the air. If I do this, Maya began, voice low, I can't fake anything. Margaret smirked. That's exactly why you'll win. They drafted the basics: community revitalization, transparency and child welfare, small business incentives, mental health access. Margaret warned her that her past would be scrutinized, weaponized. Let them, Maya said, eyes steel. Let them talk about the welfare lines, the clinics, the nights I cried in bathroom stalls. That's exactly why I should be up there. Daniel, ever her anchor, took it in stride. Are you ready for the spotlight again? He asked one night as they lay in bed, Elijah snoring softly between them. No, Maya whispered, but I'm ready for the fight. The next week was a whirlwind. Maya filed paperwork, registered her candidacy, and announced her campaign at the steps of a shuttered school in the heart of the district. She wore a simple navy dress and no makeup. Her hair was tied back like it always was on busy days. Behind her stood mothers with strollers, grandfathers leaning on canes, students holding handmade signs that read, Maya for US. She spoke from the heart. I'm not a politician, she said. I don't come from money, but I come from this city, from its streets, its broken schools, its waiting rooms, and its long, lonely nights. And I believe we deserve better. No teleprompter, no rehearsed lines, just truth. And the crowd erupted, but not everyone was pleased. A week later, Maya's campaign office was broken into. Files were tossed. Laptops stolen. No fingerprints. No security footage. Then came the whispers. A blog post accusing her of faking her husband's death for sympathy. An anonymous source claiming she had once been arrested, which wasn't true. Rumors that the Elijah Center was a money laundering scheme. Margaret handled the legal side, crushing lies with facts. But it wore on Maya. She sat alone one evening, campaign flyers in hand, eyes tired. Daniel knelt beside her. Hey, I thought I could handle this, she murmured. You can, but I'm scared. He took her hands. Fear means you care. Don't let it stop you. Let it sharpen you. Oh, she nodded, pressing her forehead to his. You're the only reason I haven't quit. He smiled. Then I'm doing my job. The next debate was held at a neighborhood church. It was packed, standing room only. Her opponent, Councilman Bradford, was an incumbent with deep pockets and a polished tongue. He opened with statistics, crime rates, tax reform, property values. Maya opened with a story. "I met a boy last week," she said. 9 years old, his mother works 2 jobs, still can't afford rent. "He told me he wants to be invisible so he doesn't get picked on at school for wearing the same clothes every day. That boy is this city, and I'm here to tell him he matters." The crowd fell silent. Then someone stood, clapped, then another, and another. By the time she finished, half the room was on their feet. Bradford tried to recover, throwing barbs, subtly questioning her background, but Maya didn't flinch. "Councilman," she said calmly, "while you were attending fundraisers at golf clubs, I was standing in food bank lines. While you were shaking hands at charity galas, I was holding the hand of a child burning with fever in an ER waiting room. I didn't read about struggle in reports. I lived it." The crowd roared. Bradford turned red. Maya left the church that night with tears in her eyes, not from pain, but from something closer to belief. Not just belief in her own voice, but in the people who finally had one through her. At home, she found Elijah asleep in Daniel's arms, a campaign button clutched in his tiny hand. "Did I do okay?" she whispered. Daniel looked up and smiled. "You didn't just do okay," he said. "You changed the conversation." Later, as Maya tucked Elijah into bed, he blinked up at her. "Are you going to be a boss, Mama?" She laughed gently, something like that. Can I be one too someday?" She kissed his forehead. "You already are." Outside, the city pulsed with noise and neon, but inside their home, there was quiet purpose. Maya sat by the window, looking out into the night. She knew the road ahead would only get harder. More lies, more attacks, more attempts to break her spirit. But she also knew this. She wasn't running for power. She was running toward justice. And for the first time in her life, she wasn't running alone. Detroit's late spring sun carried a pulse warm, insistent as if the city itself sensed transformation through Maya's campaign. Her posters brightened corners and community boards, while the Elijah Center buzzed with volunteers folding flyers and planning block walks. A grassroots energy thrived, born not of celebrity or cash, but of real stories and real lives. This week, Label's headline Bridge Detroit, reporting that Detroiters would have a chance to select at-large council members in upcoming primaries, with 4 advancing to the general election. That meant Maya's campaign wasn't just neighborhood-focused anymore. It had become citywide. She stood before the campaign office mirror, smoothing her jacket and breathing a prayer. Daniel knocked softly. "Ready?" "Ready," she replied. Her voice didn't waver. They walked into a packed fundraising luncheon later that day. Faces turned toward her. Some wore hope. Others, skepticism. Middle-aged residents who'd known only cynicism looked back, calculating whether this single mother in sensible heels could really be the breakthrough Detroit needed. At the podium, Maya started strong. "I'm not polished," she said, voice warm. "I'm not scripted. But I know how to listen, and more importantly, how to act." She spoke of organizing, of surviving, of the foundation they'd laid at the Elijah Center before it burned, before they rebuilt it. She spoke of arson threats, lies, fear. She finished with a truth. "This campaign isn't about me. It's about those of us who've been overlooked for too long." Applause followed. But when her opponent stood to speak afterward, a well-funded former aide to a previous mayor, his polished rhetoric and empty promises felt thin. Maya's authenticity cut through. Across town, Axios reported that Detroit's mayoral contest, now gearing toward a Sheffield-Kinloch showdown, demanded seasoned, neighborhood-rooted leadership, precisely the type Maya offered, although on a different race. Meanwhile, board members from Detroit Action reached out, offering training for campaign volunteers and field organizers, recognizing Maya's race wasn't just about seats, but shifting local democracy. At home, Daniel stayed up helping her configure door-knocking routes. He charted their progress on yellow post-its across the kitchen wall. Elijah sat on the counter, coloring hearts on each post-it, making the campaign literally about love. House by house. Then came election day, and the air thickened with expectation. They staged a mobilization in the morning. Maya, volunteers, and families piled into a bus that wove through neighborhoods, stopping at churches, corner stores, senior centers. At the polls, people she'd met smiled broadly. A former foster youth she'd mentored showed Maya his "I voted" sticker, and she saw in his eyes not just relief, but pride. An older woman, crutch tucked under her arm, told Maya she'd never believed in politics until tonight. By dusk, Maya and Daniel waited in the campaign office. Numbers trickled in on the screens. She watched vote totals climb. Her opponent led slightly, but Johnny next to her read out one district, then another. Maya took the lead. By the end of the night, the office erupted as she held the second slot seat needed to advance to the general election. People cheered. Volunteers hugged. Maya felt tears blur her vision. Daniel appeared at the door, phone in hand. "Detroiters," he called over the roar, "believed in you." Maya found her voice, stronger than it had ever been. "I'm not working just for one district," she said. The room hushed. "I'm running for all of us, for every parent, every child, every worker, every name that goes unheard. We're just getting started." The next day, local media compared her rise to historical figures like Betty Jean Alexander, a single mom on food stamps turned Michigan State Senator. Maya felt the weight of that legacy and embraced it. And in that moment, with logos stamped across citywide papers, she realized her campaign had become more than a route to power. It had become part of Detroit's rebirth. Because in this city, politics didn't stop at ballots. It began there. And Maya wasn't just running to win. She was running to change who could win. Spring had arrived in full force, painting Detroit in soft hues of green and promise. On campaign headquarters walls, posters of Maya fluttered in the gentle breeze, while outside, chatter about local health hubs, new one-stop school clinics, offering mental, dental, and general health services filled the air as models for the future healthcare landscape. WXYZ.com. Maya stood on a stage built for a new kind of rally, an urban planning jam. Hosted in one of those very health hubs at Denby High School, families gathered round, parents clutching kids, grandmothers leaning on canes, students perched on bleachers. Detroit, in all of her diverse, determined energy. And Maya stood before them, jacket buttoned with purpose. "Detroit's future doesn't wait for gold-plated bullet trains or billion-dollar towers," she began. "It starts with places like this where healthcare is walking distance, free, provided by people who actually listen." She continued. "We're turning burned-out buildings into life, saving clinics. We're transforming lawns into gardens. We're reimagining public spaces as classrooms, libraries, and stages for local music." She paused. Eyes scanned the crowd. At the far edge, a young boy who had met her weeks ago whispered, "Bah," and grinned. Maya's throat tightened. She spoke of more mental health, outdoor access, resource equity, and education. Local leaders and activists nodded. The concept of the Elijah Centers network was evolving into community health hubs, powered by neighbors. After the event, Margaret pulled her aside. "You know, that speech might launch you to the next level." "How?" Maya replied, hands shaking slightly with excitement. Margaret shrugged. "Or at least reshape the debate. Your opponent's trying to divert it back to politics as usual. You've made it about giving real services to real people." "No." Later, volunteers and staff gathered to add final touches to neighborhood development plans, food corridors, youth art spaces, community gardens, free shuttle routes. Daniel joined Maya at a table drawing out ideas with local teens, their laughter a soundtrack of progress. That evening, photos of Detroit's new health hubs trended alongside Maya's plans on social media. The narrative was shifting. She wasn't a candidate anymore, but a catalyst. In the campaign office, data showed a rise in young and first-time voters registering, inspired by the vision of community-first change. Elijah bounded in after school, a report card in hand, straight as. Maya cheered, hugging him tight. Daniel joined the embrace. "All these centers, and you still get straight as," he teased. Across town, as election day neared, flyers featured not just Maya's face, but images of health hubs transforming lives, the mother getting glasses she'd never had, the student accessing therapy in the hallway, the senior receiving groceries on the spot. On sidewalk canvases, Artists painted, "Healthcare is a human right, and Maya makes us whole." The night before the general election, Maya and Daniel walked through one of the hub sites. Quiet now, and empty. Sunlight filtered through windows. The scent of fresh paint mingled with hope. She knelt beside a row of newly installed bookcases and whispered, "This is what legacy looks like." Daniel squeezed her hand. "Win or lose, you already transformed lives." Election day arrived, radiant. Polls opened. The city's heartbeat quickened. By sunset, vote tallies confirmed what everyone felt. Maya would be the next at-large council member. Celebrations erupted across neighborhoods. The health hub where she'd spoken earlier hosted a watch party. Families cheered on screen as her name glowed. At home, the campaign team gathered amidst balloons and empty coffee cups. Maya took the mic. "Detroit, thank you. This win isn't for me, it's for every mom who couldn't afford rent. For the child alone with a fever. For the student who needed a place to breathe. I'm your representative now, and our real work begins tomorrow." The roar was thunderous. Later, Maya tucked Elijah in. He looked at her sleepily. "Did you win?" She pressed a kiss to his cheek. "We did, baby." Outside the window, the glow of streetlights lit up the city she and her family helped reshape. In every notebook filled, clinic opening planned, voter-inspired Detroit's new blueprint was alive. And for the first time, Maya wasn't reimagining from the sidelines. She was making it happen. On a clear autumn morning, Detroit seemed to hum with that familiar sense of possibility. Leaves, still fiery with color, drifted down streets paved with resilience and persistence. For Maya Williams, the sunrise marked not just another workday, it was the first day she walked into City Hall not as a guest, but as a council member. Her office, modest and sunlit, was perched above Grand River Avenue, walls still fresh with the scent of paint. Posters of the Elijah Center and Health Hub initiatives were pinned neatly above her desk. A plaque engraved with her oath of office sat beside a framed photograph of her, Elijah, and Daniel coaching neighborhood kids and painting murals for the center. Daniel and Elijah had walked her to the door. Elijah's small hand pressed a crayon heart to her cheek. "Do great things, Mama," he whispered. "I will," she promised. The walking tour of departments began immediately. Briefings on budgets, zoning, public safety, human services. Familiar names greeted her. The veteran community organizers she met during her campaign, excited that she was now inside the system. In the afternoon, her first committee assignment, neighborhood and community services. As she entered the room, she passed photos she once walked past as a community advocate of empty halls, boarded-up schools. Now, those eyes of Angela, the social worker from East English Village, and Pastor Hernandez from the day they announced the campaign hung in the hallway between images of sheer civic grit and revival. At her desk in committee, she spoke up during discussions on funding for city-run clinics. "We need health hubs backed by the city, not just schools, but libraries, rec centers," she said. "This isn't charity, it's public infrastructure." Heads nodded. Someone scribbled notes. She felt the current of policy begin to bend toward dreams she once barely dared to call by name. After the session, Council President Mary Waters approached her. The two stared at each other, veteran legislator and new member linked by precincts and purpose. "You're shaking things up," Waters said, tone measured but approving. "Keep going, council member. We need voices like yours." Late in the afternoon, Maya looked out her window at the Detroit skyline, cranes, domes, and rooftops rising from the horizon. Detroit's comeback was not measured in gold bricks, but in warm bricks of lived experience and shared dignity. At home, Daniel and Elijah waited in the kitchen, the scent of cinnamon and coffee welcoming her. Elijah ran forward, hugging her waist tight. "I missed you. I missed you more," she breathed, dropping to plant a kiss on his forehead. Later, while Elijah drew Council Mama on construction paper, Maya and Daniel sat side by side at the kitchen table, hands clasped. "You did it," Daniel said softly. "Not for me, for all of us." Tears blurred her vision. "We did it," she corrected. Her campaign was now policy. Her ideals were becoming bylaws, and her barrio-born wisdom was echoing through City Hall corridors. Maya may have started as a single mother yearning for dignity, but now with Elijah's laughter, Daniel's faith, and Detroit's hum in her bones, she understood. Some dreams don't start at the top. They begin at the heart, and then they transform a city. This story reminds us that resilience, truth, and compassion can transform not only a single life but an entire community. Maya's journey from a struggling single mother to a city council leader is not about luck or power. It's about the strength to keep standing when life tries to knock you down. It teaches us that real leadership comes from lived experience, and that justice is built by those who dare to remember where they came from, even as they rise. It's a story of hope, unity, and the quiet power of choosing love over fear, again and again.